Yeah, boy, it's August 21st, and it's episode 144, and this is the Fantasy Football Auctioneer Podcast. The Fantasy Football Auctioneer Podcast is the official podcast of the fantasyfootballauction.com, the internet's only website dedicated to fantasy football auctions. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Fantasy Auction, or like us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/fantasyfootballauctioneer. We got a great show for you tonight. Tonight we're just going to talk about running backs. We got some little news items and a little discussion about a Twitter conversation from last night. But then after that, we're just going to be running through some RBs. But of course, hey, all of our experts, our analysts, we're all here. We haven't done that for a while. It's pretty good. He's enjoying the lovely smell of livestock from the weekend. Freeze frame. Blister, how's it going tonight?
Going very well. Just got a round of golf in. Kids are gone up to grandparents, so unfortunately the only sad news is we got to go back to work tomorrow. Real work, the one that pays the bills. So, oh well, life is good. That's
all right, Blister. I think I've got three. We have what, three? Well, we have three. I have three drafts this week, so it'll be a good week for that. Plus another pod in for this week, so. We might be back to work, but it's going to be lots of fantasy football.
That's right. It's good.
I like it. All right. And speaking of fantasy football and drafts, he's counting down the sleeps to our big draft and the new event of Golf Trip and drinking establishment. They don't sponsor us, so I'm not going to name names. Slim, how are the arrangements going?
I hope everything should be lined up now. 6 more sleeps.
Yeah, it's good. I think rides are all dialed in. We're doing a road trip and 18 holes and then live auction. It's a full day.
Yes.
Papa Blister's going to take good care of us.
I got a lot of shooters lined up for you guys. Hopefully, the guy that's awake at the end of the auction might be this year's winner.
So you'll win again? That's not fair.
I can't guarantee it.
All right, and he's a featured writer on Gridiron Experts. I didn't mention we had a guest tonight. Fantasy footballers. He's also from Data Force, which we've talked about a few times from our auction draft on there. He's also written an article for us on the early trends in fantasy football. More interesting to me as I'm reading through the bio on Gridiron Experts, Eric, that interests me is a nuclear electrician, surface warfare officer in the Navy. I mean, we're just teachers. Eric, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm actually hanging out at the in-laws today, but I get along with them, so it's cool. And yeah, so I was in the Navy for about 12 years and did some cool things that I could tell you about, but I'd probably have to kill you. So I don't want to do that.
No, let's not do that. You're at the in-laws. That's where I recorded last week. I was in the basement and had Rubbermaid containers stacked up. So I am set on an exercise ball, and then we're talking to Russ Tucker. The world of hiding behind the screen is a good thing. So, Eric, before we get things rolling, you just tell. I just listed a bunch of things about you, but why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
All right, so yeah, I did the Navy thing for a little while, and then I decided, you know what, I really want to write. I love fantasy football, and started writing for Gridiron Experts, and then started writing for fantasy footballers as well, and then. I just looking at it and kind of doing some more writing, I realized that auction was really kind of my thing, and so reached out to you guys. We did that auction with Data Force, and that was a ton of fun and really cool, by the way, because we had some guys that were experts but never really did an auction draft before, and so they kind of got some exposure that way. And then obviously doing it with you guys, so we had some people that were really experienced and some people that were brand new to the auctions. So that was a lot of fun. So. Yeah, this year's been pretty crazy, and I just got a position actually with Gridiron Experts as their editor, so that's pretty exciting too.
Cool. All right, well, hopefully you're not doing editing like Blister does on our script all night. As I'm trying to read, he's in there adding apostrophes and all those things to really mess me up. So stay off my script tonight, okay?
Yeah.
Just kidding. All right, so like I said, we've got some. Buy or sell action. We'll talk a little bit about Twitter. We got buy or sell, and then we're going to roll into RBs. So if you guys are ready, then I'm ready. Let's cock the hammer. It's time for action. All right, so before we get rolling, Blister, we were just talking off the air, and I just caught it a little bit. I was driving across the country last night. What was going on Twitter with this? Was it Rhode Island or Long Island or something going on?
Yeah, we have to give a shout out to the boys in the Rosenblatt Long Island League who did their draft last night. Sounds like they had a lot of fun. Uh, we had a pretty good Twitter thread going on last night. They want us to check out their teams and evaluate them and see who we like the best. And they had a pretty nice draft, if you ask me. It was a 10-team league, so the teams are a little obviously a little bit stronger than in a 12 team. That goes without saying, but
Yeah.
they kind of wanted us to break it all down. It sounded like they're having a lot of fun. And when I did a quick study of them here, I had Team Mitty as maybe my favorite. After that, he had a good quarterback in Drew Brees. He had real good depth at receiver. He had Odell, B. Marsh, T.Y. Hilton. Looking down the list, he had Gurley and Woodhead. Woodhead last year is number 3 in PPR running back, so he might not finish as high, but he's probably a good bet to finish top 15. And then you could even bounce D'Angelo Williams into his flex position because he'll be starting the first 3 games. At tight end, Kobe Fleener, I think, should be in line for a good year. Probably the number 2 kicker at very minimum, and Hauschka, and the Bengals D should be pretty solid. So all in all, he had a really solid team, I thought. And then I had Miles real quickly. This is my top 3 real quick. Top 4. Miles had Andrew Luck, and then he had good receivers in Dez, Keenan Allen, Larry Fitzgerald. He had Freeman and Dougie Martin. He could start at running back. He had Gio that he could bounce into his flex if he wanted, or even Charles Sims. Tyler Eifert, he does need to get a tight end because I think that's the only one he drafted. And I don't think he's got a D yet, so he'll have to pick up a D. And so I like the looks of that team, pretty strong all the way through. Charlie's team I thought was pretty good. Hopkins, Jeffrey Decker. You got Zeke and Lacey. McKinnon is in his, I don't know if that's his flex right now. He's got Michael Thomas in there, but he could put Marvin Jones in there, probably even LeGarrette Blount, Alan Hearns. Ertz at tight end we really like. And so that was probably my top 3. Jack, we talked quite a bit, and Jack went and drafted Sammy Watkins. I don't know what he's thinking. We told him Doug Martin. I don't know, Jack. Listen, no, kidding. We told him Sammy Watkins. He does have a nice team, though. He's got Julio and Sammy and Matthews, his receivers. He's got, down below, too, he can bump in Aiken or Travis Benjamin. At running back, AP and Jamal Charles. Now, I really do like them, but I do have, even when you think about youth like maybe Le'Veon or Zeke or Gurley or David Johnson, I kind of give them a little bit of an edge over AP and Charles. AP could lose some touches to McKinnon this year. Charles, I think they don't want to run him. They know that West and Spencer Ware can do a good job in behind him, so that's why I kind of downgrade that part of it a little bit, even though they are pretty solid. Romo's probably one of my worries. He's been banged up pretty good. And then Gates, too, he's not getting any younger at tight end, but that's my top 4. They're all pretty solid. Like I said to those guys, whoever plays the waiver wire at the best, could be the guy in the end of the season that has the winning team. It's not necessarily every year. I think about our draft. We go to our draft and we put all the teams up on the wall and we have a quick debate on who's the best looking team, and I don't think it ever works out like that, because guys get hurt and somebody else may scoop somebody on the waiver wire. So it's just, that's the best part, though, going to the draft, getting around with the boys, having fun and making fun of each other and having a good time. So shout out to the boys. Thanks for following us, and appreciate the support, and have a good year this year. Good luck.
Yeah, Eric, anything to add? You were part of that thread last night too.
Yeah, I agreed. Mitty was by far, like, if I could take a team and just create it, just top to bottom, pretty awesome team. I did like Jack's team as well. And the good thing about Jack's team, too, is that he had Charles, but he also had Ware and West, so he's kind of backed up in that way. Kamar Aiken, I think, might come in and offer some pretty good value there. Crowell and Vereen, I think he's got lots of options there where he can improve his team. So, yeah, I think it's pretty solid. Mitty's got that one.
Mitty's got the one. And now, Slim, were you on Twitter last night? Because I got a DM last night from our buddy, the Road Warrior, and he mentioned something about you need a smack or something. I don't even know what you were tweeting, but he was worried that someone had hacked my account for something last night. I don't know if he's making a joke because he said it was funny, so maybe that was the joke that I put something funny on Twitter. But then he said he had to keep an eye on you last night.
No, I was at my sister-in-law's wedding, and I checked my phone at one point, and there was like 20 notifications, and I was trying to read it, and I'll admit I was pretty filled up by them. So I was trying to go through, sitting at the table, trying to read all these things and follow what was going on. And I don't know. It was anyway. Phone ended up pretty much going back in my pocket. I think Dave was losing it a little
he
bit
was.
because I swore on Twitter or something. And he was what? You never done. But I don't know.
I do like that he takes care of us, though.
I put my phone back, and I was like, I'm gonna avoid this till the morning.
There you go.
But then I felt like trash this morning, so I had to try to read it.
I had a DM from him. Is everything okay? And I'm like, what? I don't even know what's going on. I was on the road. I don't know what was happening. So I was just making sure everything was okay because Dave, he's always looking out for us, so that's good. Shout out to the Road Warrior. All right, so we hit that league. We've reviewed their team. Everybody likes Team Mitty, so shout out to Mitty. Hopefully you play the waiver wire just right and you go and win that league, and then you can say, see, we told you that you had the best team, and so that'll be awesome. So let's move on to our first segment here, because that was only our listener question. So we're going to move on to the fantasy news. So this is a fantasy news buy or sell. All right, so in the buy or sell, we take a look at some news items and then the fantasy implications of those items, and then we ask our analysts if they're buying or selling those implications. So let's throw to Eric first. I haven't gone through this. Made up the script tonight, so we'll take a look at it. So the first one is suspension of the Steelers running back Le'Veon Bell is reduced to 3 games. So the NFL cut that from 4 to 3 for violating the league substance abuse policy. So originally he was looking at 4, but now through the appeal he's come down to 3. So Eric, the question is buy or sell. Le'Veon Bell should be drafted now for over $50 in your auction.
Yeah, I'm definitely selling on that. So it was questionable before, if you think about it, because he's had a little bit of a pass. If you remember, he got arrested with Garrett Blunt back in the day for marijuana possession, and so now he's going through this. This is a second or third incident that he's already had. Plus, he's had some pretty rough knees. So I would much rather put that money into some kind of top wide receiver than put it into a running back, and this is classic reason why.
There it is. All right, Blister, let's go to you next. Bills release the suspended running back Carlos Williams. So Williams played well as a rookie. He scored 9 touchdowns last year and had a good yards per carry. Showed up to camp with baby weight on. Rex Ryan didn't enjoy it, but he said he wasn't going to give up on the running back. And a couple weeks later, he gets cut. So now we've got Gillislee, who might be in there. We got LaShawn McCoy, obviously. We know that Reggie Bush is in the mix now, Blister. So buy or sell. Reggie Bush is actually draftable.
I'm going to sell that as well. I just think that what's going to shake out is once this Jonathan Williams, the rookie, gets more and more comfortable with this offense, he might be the best talent behind LaShawn McCoy. Gillislee, I think, got a concussion, so who knows how long that'll keep him out. But I just think that you're better off to pass on Reggie, pick up Jonathan even cheaper. I mean, they're probably both $1 in your draft, but Jonathan's probably that back that has the best chance to have a meaningful role down the road, especially if McCoy goes out. So I'm gonna pass on Reggie.
So segueing to a little bit more about McCoy, follow-up question, Blister. Does this change his value at all because he doesn't have Carlos Williams breathing down his throat?
Well, I think he's going to get used pretty heavily. I don't know if it. I think Williams is going to be suspended for 4 games anyway. So I think in that time span, if he's getting the ball a lot and doing well and being effective, which we expect him to be, then I don't think they're going to downplay that or change that. So they're in a pretty tough division that the teams are going to probably put up a lot of points. They're going to have to get the ball in their best players' hands, and it's McCoy and Watkins, and after that it's pretty sparse. So I think he's going to be busy no matter what.
All right, let's move on to the next one, and I'm just reading this now for the first time. I wasn't sure why you guys were talking about Dion Lewis earlier, but I'm just reading here for the first time. Running back Dion Lewis will be sidelined for the next 8 to 10 weeks after a quote-unquote relatively minor procedure. This one is going to you, Slim. So he had the knee surgery back in November on the torn ACL. That seemed to be, in Patriot speak, okay. And now the medical staff has determined that they need to clean up an area in that knee. So, Slim, the question is, buy or sell? This news means you won't bother buying any Patriot running back at the auction.
Well, I'll sell it, I guess, because I'll buy anybody for the right price.
Right.
I mean, I think what it does is it really convolutes things a little bit in the sense that people that had, and I was one of them, I had Dion, who was ranked fairly high. So now, say he misses, the first 6 weeks, if he goes on the pup list. Well, when he comes back, what's his role going to be? How much does that affect, James White, who's probably going to see the biggest uptick now with Lewis going out. So I think Blunt's role goes up a little bit. Obviously, James White becomes a player, but I mean, to me, what happens when Lewis comes back is the question. And so, yeah, I mean, if you can get these guys for dirt cheap still, for sure. I always advocate for buying values, but I just think it's going to be typical New England backfield once everybody, hopefully gets healthy. How do things shake out? I mean, that could be anybody's guess in week 7 or week 8 or whatever. So, yeah, I'm going to probably typically avoid unless I can get somebody for really cheap.
Right, based on the deals. And, I mean, I guess that's always the right answer is you'll buy anybody for the right price.
Yeah,
and,
for me,
yeah. Those guys have to have some value at some point, right?
Well, I always liked Blunt to some extent, I'll be honest, just because to me he does offer some of that touchdown upside. It's kind of maddening trying to predict which weeks necessarily he's going to go off in, and I mean sometimes you get lucky and you can look at the projected game scripts and stuff, and if they're going against a pretty soft rush defense or a team that you predict or Vegas kind of projects them to be pretty big favorites, you can kind of anticipate Blunt's going to get a lot of touches in the second half if they're just stomping a team by halftime.
Yep.
But as somebody who's owned Blunt quite a few times now, it can be maddening. I think James White's probably a little more consistent just because of what he can do in the passing game. He can keep kind of give him a little more consistent fantasy production weekly, but yeah, it's going to be something that's probably going to piss off a lot of fantasy owners throughout the season.
Not you, though, right, Eric? You didn't just draft him or anything?
No, not at all. So, yeah, no. That forced draft, he was definitely in there. The good thing is, going into that draft, it's a best ball draft. So this one I was kind of aiming to have a bunch of people that could potentially give me some value. So I did have Dion Lewis, but I also had Amir Abdullah, Giovanni Bernard, Ryan Matthews, and Terrence West. So I actually picked him up on waivers. So I'm kind of set there. It didn't really affect me too much, but that's a classic. That's why you go 0 RB. The strength of my team was not running backs. It was wide receivers. So, I'm not sweating it. If I have another injury to running backs, then I could be a little bit freaking out. But I'm still good with there.
All right. Okay. So we'll stay at the running backs for the last news item, and Eric will throw this one to you. We're taking a look at Christine Michael with the Seattle Seahawks. Is he back on the radar? So he keeps getting some positive press here in Seattle, and it really seems like he might be making a turn in his career. The potential bad news for Rawls truthers, but of course doubters for Michael will say that he's always looking good when things don't count, and then when things actually do matter, he doesn't do a lot. So, Eric, buy or sell? We shouldn't be tricked into falling into the same old story again this year.
Well, this is another one of those like at the right price type deals because I was actually kind of watching him because he did pretty good at the end of last year. So I was kind of watching him and thinking that if I can get him for $1 or $2, he might be worth a shot. But now that he is on the radar, it kind of depends on where he goes and how much he goes for. So I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see him going for about the same amount that you see D'Angelo Williams going for. And D'Angelo Williams has a clear shot at starting the first 3 games, and maybe even more beyond that. So I would much rather pay for D'Angelo Williams than Christian Michael. So it's kind of a wait and see. If you can get him for a steal, then that's fine. But if this is going to cost you more than D'Angelo Williams, I'd rather go D'Angelo Williams all day.
All right. Slim, nice choice on the news items tonight. All RBs for the RB special. Nice work.
Wow. That kind of was,
Yeah.
kind of with the theme, so tried to. Hopefully that wasn't too surprising for everybody.
No. All right, so let's get into the more into RB depth here, taking a look at auction strategies, nomination strategies, things that we're going to look at moving forward at the running back position. Now with the meat of our lineup, our draft lineups coming here in the next couple of weeks. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go to Eric and say thanks a lot for writing the article for the website, the early trends in auctions. You really did hit on some some good topic areas, and I think we'll kind of just start with the first one that you were looking at there with the zero RB in auction land. So that's something that you noted right away, first thing in the article on the website. So talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing with zero RB this year.
Well, with zero RB, all of a sudden you're having a bunch of these running backs that would normally be maybe late first, early second round running backs going way later than that. And so their values are coming down a little bit. So you still see like Todd Gurley's and before he got hurt or before he got suspended, Lev Bell, they were still pretty expensive. But now you're seeing people like LaShawn McCoy. He's going for around like $20 in some of the auctions I've seen, or C.J. Anderson. And these are guys that have a clear, straight shot at the starting role. And last year was weird. There were so many running backs that just completely busted from the first round on. And I don't think it's going to happen quite again this year. So some of those running backs are going to go for incredible values this year.
And so at that zero RB strategy, like what's the price point you're starting to think about going in? If we hear about it in auction, in snake drafts, it's nothing before round 6, let's say. Like what would be a starting dollar point if things stay as regular auction values?
Yeah, I'm starting to look at running backs around the $20 level, somewhere in there. I'm starting to really look at running backs. I still think you need to get your wide receivers early, because last year I actually did another article where I looked at the wide receivers that are drafted after wide receiver 38, and only 18% of those did anything. Only 18% of them had more than 65 receptions, more than 1,000 yards, or 10 touchdowns. So once you get to a certain point, your wide receivers are going to start to look really thin, really bad. So you definitely need to get your wide receivers early, but at the same time, I don't know if it's a great idea to spend money on the big 3 wide receivers. I think I'd rather have 4 wide receivers in the top 24 or so, and just make it a really solid wide receiver core, then go ahead and pay top dollar for those top 3 guys. But yeah, and then try to get just values at running backs, whoever it is. It's going to be LaShawn McCoy, C.J. Anderson, Carlos Hyde. One of those guys are going to slip and fall and become really cheap.
All right, Blister, what about you? What do you think of that RB0 strategy this year?
Well, I like it, except I've kind of been a proponent of it for a while too. I think it's kind of helped me the last couple of years, but because what I have been seeing, and it's probably repeating what Eric said, but the top end running backs values have been coming down, and it gets to that point where how do you pass up on a guy like Zeke or Lev or David Johnson when they're Todd Gurley or somebody like that when the value is so good? I mean, even Adrian Peterson, he didn't have a real flashy year last year, but he still had, didn't he lead the league in rushing? He was right up there. And he still had a pretty darn solid year. So when he's down into the high 20s for dollars, when we've been paying 60 for him for the last few years, it's hard to pass that up. So, and the worst part is you used to nominate those guys knowing that he'd suck a lot of money out of somebody's budget, and now he's not really making them. He's so cheap, yet he still has that potential to lead the running backs. So, yeah, it's interesting. I still like a lot of receivers, but with these values of running back coming down, it really makes me have a hard time not going after them.
And yeah, and I was seeing that in the Auction Kings, Blister. That's why I end up with AP and even Todd Gurley at 46. I thought it's the price point, but then all of a sudden, what do you got for receivers? It was scraping then.
What did you pay for AP in that one?
37.
37 for AP?
37 for AP, 46 for Gurley.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's pretty cheap for big guys like that. And
that's what I was gonna say. Like, I feel like if you're an owner that wants to go zero RB, one thing I would recommend is having a plan B of kind of like what Eric said. In a lot of the mocks and drafts that I've done, once you get into kind of like that for me, my third tier of running back. So Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, Devontae Freeman, Doug Martin, and even like Mark Ingram and McCoy. A couple of those guys go for way cheaper, in my opinion, than I think that they should. And it's if you're going that 0 RB and you see somebody like Mark Ingram or McCoy sitting there for $25 and you budgeted 15 because you're going to stick with this 0 RB, I feel like you need to have a budget ready, locked in, saying,
right.
Hey, if I got to spend 25, 30 on one of these guys that slides that I think can be an RB1 or a top 5 fantasy running back, then you're prepared to take a stab at them, and you have a budget that's going to that ripple effect is going to be figured out instead of you having to scramble, figure out, oh shit, do I want to make a bid, and what happens if I get them, and where am I going to start pulling funds from, and trying to avoid that whole scrambling in your draft, which can sometimes lead to panic and disarray for some guys. So, I think I agree. I think there's a lot of these guys that slide, and if you can capitalize and steal one of those guys, even if you got to pay up a little bit more than you thought, it can reap some pretty big rewards this year.
Well, and I think you bring up an interesting point there, Slim, about having that second or third budget kind of locked in and knowing where you're going to go if things go one way. And I didn't have that necessarily for this Auction Kings. Luckily, it's a slow draft, so I could do some work on it in between picks. But live, especially if it was, live just on the computer draft with that quick clock, the way that it goes, wouldn't have a lot of time to sit and work that out because, like I say, all of a sudden I get the AP and Todd Gurley, which is exactly the opposite way that I want to go, but just finding value. And if it was a live draft, I would have been really struggling for, like, what am I going to target? What am I going to do now? And luckily, it was in the slow format, so I could sit back and take a look at what I wanted to do. So it's a good point to go out there and try those mocks, or even, like we say before, just writing stuff down about what your team could look like one way or the other. And so you're flexible as we go. I did end up in that league, by the way. I did love I got Theo Riddick at the end for $1.
Yeah.
And I got Tevin Coleman for $1 at the end too.
That's pretty good.
So I mean, I did leave with money on the table, and Blister, I don't know about you in this slow auction format, but I found it difficult because you might have money riding on 3 or 4 guys, and then you don't end up getting them, and then now you're sitting with kind of money in your pocket. And I ended up with that here, but it was because, I saw a guy like Coleman coming later or a guy like Riddick coming later, so I'm kind of expecting to spend money on them, and then a little bit of money anyways, right? And then I get them each for $1, and now I look like a fool with money in my pocket. But that slow draft makes it difficult that way, I thought.
Yeah, it is different. Like, we should almost probably do an article, but I don't know how many people do it like this, where there's 24 guys on the board at the same time. And I had been sitting and waiting to nominate Sammy Watkins, but I wanted people to bleed their money out first, and then somebody else went in and nominated him, and a few other guys. So I kept bidding on him, and then it got out of my price range. But then as soon as he got over like $23, I couldn't afford him. I recirculated all that money in and upbid other guys I wanted, like Zach Ertz, and I had Danny Woodhead. Now he's out of my price range, so I just nominated Frank Gore. But it's a real there's a whole strategy to doing that. With there's 24 people on the clock, you got to try to get people's money tied up, and obviously you have no control over the other 11 guys they're going to do. But it's kind of fun. You got to be patient. I learned that after day one.
yeah, you have to be patient, and you sometimes are not so good at that.
Strong suit.
Not my best, no. Not my best.
So, Eric, heading into auctions, I mean, how many have you done so far? You did Data Force with us. What else have you hit?
So I've done 3. I have a home league that we're coming up on. It's kind of like a keeper auction type league. And then I have another auction coming up on Data Force, and that's a live auction. So the other ones were email auctions and kind of slow and stuff like that. So that'll be a little bit different.
A little bit more that way. So when heading into the auctions you've done and your home league, what are some of those RB strategies you're looking at hopefully executing during the auction?
I'm still about 0 RB, so I still want to make sure that my wide receiver core, I kind of start there. And I heard you mention that you use about 60% of your budget. And that's about what I want to use, about 60% of my budget for wide receivers.
Yeah.
And I'll take about 55% of that will go towards my top 4 wide receivers. And what I've kind of discovered in playing with it is that you can get one of those big 3 wide receivers. But if you do that, you're going to be relying on somebody like John Brown or Kamar Aiken or something like that to kind of come through for you. Whereas if you spread that out and you get people like Sammy Watkins and Jeremy Maclin and get 4 of those guys, you know you're going to get production from them. If one of them gets hurt or the quarterback gets hurt, it's not going to kill you. And then you can use like a John Brown. You might get him for your 5th wide receiver or 6th wide receiver, and you can plug him in. So it's kind of like a risk type thing where I'd rather have 4 solid wide receivers that I can plug in there week to week, and then have a 5th or a 6th that maybe on a bye week or something like that, if injury happens, plug him in. But if you get one of those big 3 wide receivers, things kind of have to fall just right for you.
So what type of budget are you setting then for your RBs?
For RBs, I'm looking at something in like the 30% range, something like that. I'm hoping that to get like a LaShawn McCoy, like one of them kind of falls, and so I can get them kind of cheap, but otherwise kind of spread out a little bit. So like the guys like Gio Bernard, they're going a little bit cheaper. That should at least produce for you. Certainly Frank Gore. Frank Gore is huge. He's kind of like the stopgate. If things don't quite go right and you get outbid on some guys, if you can get Frank Gore, then good to go, because it doesn't look like anybody's challenging him for the number 1 role. He's on a high-powered offense, so he might be 33 years old, but kind of saves your butt a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Slim, what about you heading in? Not to give away too much for the weekend, but what are some of the strategies you're looking at for RB?
I think I've tried a lot of different ones, honestly, and I think one thing I learned, and I agree a lot with what Eric was saying with these top receivers. I mean, I love Antonio Brown. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1. Talked about it last week. It's got very high likelihood to be the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. But in mocking to get him on your team, it just cripples. I hate what the rest of my wide receivers look like. I might get another good one, but after that, it's just like Eric said. I'm looking at guys like, John Brown and, Michael Floyd or something like that as my wide receiver 3, and I just don't like the look of that. I mean, I just feel like you can build such better teams by trying to target one of these guys, in the top 10 or 8 that is going to fall. There always seems to be one, whether it's, Keenan Allen I've seen go a little bit cheaper, Brandon Marshall because he's old, or whatever. One of those kinds of guys always seems to drop a little bit. And then somebody like Mike Evans will drive the price way back up, or, whatever, something like that. It's kind of that horseshoe that we talk about.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you can build. If you can get, 3-4 guys in the top 24 wide receivers, I just think you can, build a really strong-looking team like that. And it's funny, Eric mentioned Frank Gore. To me, he's always kind of the guy I've got highlighted. If things are getting a little crazy with running backs and they're going for just a little higher than I'm willing to pay, I know that a player like him, a guy like Rashad Jennings, some of these guys that are older that people tend to overlook because of that age or maybe some durability concerns, I can fall back on those guys a little bit, knowing I've kind of got them in my back pocket, and they should be a good value for me. So, and I think they'll be fairly productive. So yeah, that's kind of the way I'm leaning right now. I mean, I've dabbled with some tight ends in there, but for the most part, I don't feel the need to spend big money on one of those running backs that, I'll admit 3 years ago, I was that guy. I wanted to spend, 55 plus on an RB1 and get a workhorse. And now, I don't think I really need to do that.
What about Blister? You're probably in the same boat as these guys, so I'm going to alter the question a little bit. Are you, when you're looking at this zero RB-ish type of a strategy, are you looking at hopefully trying to get a guy like LaShawn McCoy or C.J. Anderson, and then picking away at Chris Ivory's and Amir Abdullah's, or are you still looking to try to hit in that DeMarco, Carlos Hyde, Duke Johnson, maybe Lat Murray Like, I guess it's all kind of the same tier. Are you looking to get 2 or 3 guys out of that massive tier in there, or you hit one and then dabble down low?
It's tough. Like I was saying, it's so hard to pass up on Eddie Lacy and CJ and Doug Martin, guys like that often, they're going for the mid-20s to the low 30s, 25, 28, $31, which to me seems like a pretty good deal for guys that potentially could be a top 5 back if all goes well. They could also slide the other direction. So it's hard to pass that up. I mean, it was in Eric's league in the Addicts League there, where I just thought I was doing a little price enforcing with Dougie Martin and Eddie Lacy, and there was the first 2 guys on my squad. So, and I don't mind the look of it because it's a best ball league, but I never got one of the top receivers. I have Cobb, Jordan, White, Larry Fitzgerald, Alan Hearns, Crabtree, and Marcus Wheaton. So in a best ball league, maybe that's not so bad. But in a normal redraft league where you're playing somebody each week, I really think it's important to have a big gun, at least one on your receiving core. So, it's hard because if you drop down, like the guys are saying, to the Frank Gores and the Rashad Jennings, you save a lot of money then. And then you got to go after their backups. But if you're getting Rashad Jennings for $6-8, you're probably no doubt getting their backup for $1, so you can afford to do that. So I think it's not a bad strategy to handcuff those older backs, Frank Gore and Rashad Jennings, and probably Jonathan Stewart, with their backup, because it's a good chance they will go down, but at least you still have the starting running back on those teams, and you can probably then afford the big time receivers. So for me, it's going to be, can I say no to Eddie Lacy at $27 or CJ Anderson or some guys like that? Right. And if I can, then I'm dropping way down. But in an auction, like you guys know this, and it depends who you nominate. Like, knowing this, probably the first guy out of your mouth is going to be Doug Martin, I'll bet it, or something like that. And right. Then you see me squirm in my seat to figure out what I'm going to do. Right. So, like you say, you got to be flexible. You got to have a few different plans and what your team will look like, and we'll see how it goes.
So, Eric, let's segue into some of that nomination strategy. So, what are some strategies you're looking at as far as nominations around running backs? Are you going to find your sweet spot tier and try to get some of those guys out early to set a price point, or are you just saying Todd Gurley and here we go?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. I don't look too much into nomination strategy, to be honest, but the one thing that I do want to figure out is kind of like where the prices are at pretty quickly. So how much are people willing to pay for those top wide receivers? If I can get them cheap, then that's fine. I saw NFL.com just did a draft, and I think it was maybe Odell Beckham or something like that went for 52. It was something fairly cheap. And then Antonio Brown went for 67. So obviously, whoever had Odell got quite a steal there. So I kind of want to figure that out. Is there some kind of price disparity with those top 3 guys? I think more than likely you're gonna be looking at $60 for all of them. So I don't worry too much about that. Plus, they're normally nominated in the first round, so don't really think too much about that. The other thing is quarterbacks. I want to figure out quarterbacks is really weird this year because some people are all about the late round quarterback and don't want to put too much of their money or their draft capital into a quarterback early. So I kind of want to figure out where those prices are at. One of the first drafts I did, Aaron Rodgers went for $12 in a $200 league, so that was pretty incredible. That was an incredible deal. And other ones, you're looking at $20, $25. So there's a big disparity there. I want to figure out where it is. If it's cheap, I'll take a quarterback. If it's going to be in the $20+ range, then I'll probably pass on a quarterback. So I kind of like the idea of putting up somebody that I don't mind passing on if they get too expensive, like Russell Wilson. Just kind of see what people are paying for that. And it's the same type of deal with running backs. If running backs are going really expensive, I kind of want to focus on wide receivers. So if running backs are going pretty expensive, I'll put up their running backs all day, trying to drive down people's budgets a little bit. If they're going pretty cheap, then I might want to just grab a running back early. So, like you guys said, always be flexible. Even though I'm kind of a zero RB type guy, if I can get a running back really cheap, a Todd Gurley or Adrian Peterson really cheap, I'll take that all day.
Okay, and how about you, Slim? I'm going to throw the same question to you. Some nomination strategies around your RBs.
I kind of, I like Blister said, I like nominating somebody early, like a LaShawn McCoy or CJ Anderson. Somebody that maybe I wouldn't mind grabbing that I'm hoping could somehow slide to, say, around $20. You know what I mean? It doesn't happen often, but I've seen it where I think one of the mocks we didn't like Mark Ingram go for like 18 or something like that.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it was
think
just
so,
crazy.
something like that. Yeah.
So I like to just maybe start with one of those guys and see what the general vibe of the draft is. I mean, yeah, are they going to be expensive? Does that mean people are going to pay up? I mean, if people are willing to pay up for a running back like that, then you know that there's going to be guys probably willing to pay up above and beyond, for Todd Gurley and David Johnson and those guys. So it's kind of just setting the bar of the price, knowing, all right, what am I in for here? If I want one of these running backs, do I have to spend to go get them? Does it just tell me right away that, all right, I got to focus on some of these cheaper guys, and maybe I keep nominating some of these big name guys in my second nomination, my third nomination, just to try and drive out money, fill up running back spots on my opponent's rosters, so that hopefully it creates those values later in the draft for me.
Blister, I'm going to ask you the same question. I mean, this is one of the reasons why you got to love, the auction-only podcast here. Like, nowhere else are we going to have three guys sitting here talking about their nomination strategies for running backs in a draft. I mean, you're going to have a auction special, and it's going to introduce you to auctions and talk about some basic strategies and leave it at that. So, Blister, I love this, that the three guys talking deep into their nomination strategies. So what's yours for RBs?
Well, I think I still would like to get those potential high dollar ones out right away. Try to get some money spent. I would be happy with any of those guys myself. Like, if they're going to stay in the $40 range, I'm going to probably be bidding on them. Once they get over 50, I'd probably rather turn that 50 into AJ Green or a receiver. But we'll see how it goes. But again, early on, I'm going to get those guys out there, try to get money spent. Sometimes people will throw out early on a guy from a lower tier, like quite a bit down, maybe like Danny Woodhead, for example. And I see in a lot of auctions he goes for pretty cheap. Like in ours right now, the one I'm in, he's at $6. So, he doesn't always go that cheap, but still, by the time he comes up, a lot of guys have a lot of money spent. You throw them out there too early, a guy like Danny Woodhead, probably even Arian Foster, when guys still have a full pocket full of money, they're going to go $10, $12, $15 potentially. So I don't want to do that with guys that you should get cheaper earlier on. But I want to get the bigger money spent, like a Todd Gurley or Ezekiel Elliott and stuff like that. So I'll still get those guys out there, and I won't rule them out of being on my team if the price is right.
Well, and I like the idea of maybe throwing out one of those tiers you're targeting early, like Slim was kind of saying, set the price point, maybe sneak one in, sneak that guy in early. But I find that if you go Matt Forte or Ryan Matthews or something like that, you kind of set that bar, and then no one's thinking about that tier until well later. But now you've kind of set that point, and you can work on what your strategy is going to be to get guys in that mark. So you kind of set those values early. But I'm kind of like you too, Blister. I mean, why not throw David Johnson and flush out some cash, and then next round do Cam Newton and flush out some more, and then you really get to work on it. So anything else about nomination strategies, guys?
I'm good.
But all really? Good?
Well, all right. So Eric, who are some guys right now that you're seeing as far as value picks at RB? I mean, you mentioned Frank Gore earlier, but who are some guys that you're seeing that are ending up on your team because they're just turning around such great value for you?
I kind of mentioned him. So it seems like starting with LaShawn McCoy, not every draft is going to be like this, but LaShawn McCoy, C.J. Anderson, Thomas Rawls, Carlos Hyde, like one of those guys consistently seems to be falling. And also Latavius Murray. I know there's a lot of controversy with Latavius Murray, and people are like, oh, he's in 16 games and he had this okay season, but he's very inefficient. Well, he also doesn't have much competition behind him. And he's running behind one of the best offensive lines. So if you're really worried about maybe somebody like DeAndre Washington taking over his spot, then why don't you spend $1 or $2 on DeAndre Washington? So I think that's the point that I'm really looking at, guys. That McCoy through Hyde type range, I'm okay with those guys by themselves. If you're worried about somebody taking their spot, I think Murray, maybe you can pair him with a handcuff and you're fine. DeMarco Murray, that team's actually looking pretty decent. And it looks like that might be some value right there. Matt Forte and Bilal Powell, you can pair up those guys. So I think there's a lot of options for standalone running backs, but also for getting both of the running backs and not paying very much for that production.
Right, yeah, and then you figure out what works one guy's for the first half of the season, the handcuff for the rest of it. So what about you? Who are some guys you're seeing as good values so far?
Well, I think my boy Danny Woodhead always is a good value in my eyes, but like right now I have him as my RB50 in PPR leagues, which, I mean, I don't think anybody can expect him to do what he did last year, but, I mean, we've seen it before when Ryan Matthews was there, getting over 200 touches. I think he still finished as the RB like 12 or something in PPR leagues. So even if Melvin Gordon does get a lot of carries, there's still going to be a lot of opportunity for Danny Woodhead to put up points. I mean, obviously there's going to be regression from RB3. I mean, I just can't see that happening.
But he's the red zone threat there, right? I mean,
well, I mean, I was on the Melvin Gordon hype train a little bit this year. I was expecting to bounce back. I mean, I figured the offensive line couldn't be any worse. But watching a little bit of the Chargers, it seems like the offensive line is still pretty bad. Listening to, I think it was a RotoViz pod where they were talking to one of the beat writers from San Diego. They were talking about Melvin Gordon. Like, he just doesn't seem like a smart football player in terms of grasping like pass protection and blocking schemes and things like that. So again, if you can't block, then
it makes it pretty tough.
He's not going to be on the field maybe as much as we thought, and Danny Woodhead can block, so he's going to earn snaps just in that. And yeah, I mean, he's got some of that touchdown potential, even though it's not going to be those punch-ins from the 2-yard line and things like that, but he is used a lot in the red zone, so he does have that upside. I mean, to me, having him as RB15, that kind of, it's not like you're paying for his ceiling right there. Mm-hmm. It's to me a pretty safe spot to put him. I don't really foresee him dropping too much lower than that. I mean, he might slide a little bit into the lower in the RB2 range, but you're still paying for an RB2 with RB1 upside. Right. So, yeah, I mean, old Danny, he's always kind of the value for me.
Blister, how about you? Who are a couple of guys you're targeting as real values at RB?
Well, not necessarily targeting, but it was always surprising to see, like, Thomas Rawls still, he's going for dirt cheap, typically under $20, between roughly 17. Guy like Matt Jones, I'm not real high on him, but I mean, just like Latavius Murray, there's not a lot behind him. So as long as he can hold on to the ball, they should have a pretty good offense through the air. He should get some good opportunities. He's just got to be able to hold on to the ball. But other two guys, like along the line of Danny Woodhead, Theo Riddick and Charles Sims, two guys that had really good years last year, especially in a PPR format. I mean, they're afterthought. Like you said, I think you got Riddick for $1, and in our draft, they're the one I'm in right now on the Auction Kings, they're probably going to go for something similar, because most of the guys' monies are all spent. And it's odd because this draft too, it's only a 15-man roster, 9 starters and 6 on your bench. So you have a little bit more money to throw at some of these guys, but still, there's guys like that going for. I nominated Kamar Aiken for $1, thinking somebody else would spend more on him, and I got him at $1, which was a little disappointed in, but still for $1, and he had 186 points, I think, something like that in PPR last year. So he's pretty solid, and he's not in a bad situation either. So we mentioned Rashad Jennings and Gore and some of the older guys. They're still good and they're cheap. And so if you want to go heavy at any other position, I mean, if you want to load up at tight end and quarterback, you can still get very serviceable starting running backs for cheap. And if they do go down, who cares? He only lost maybe $6 versus $56.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I want to ask all you guys.
I'm looking. Yeah, go.
Do you guys have any of you guys, any players that you're just refusing to buy this year? Like, you almost feel like, I don't care what the price is, I just don't want him on my team. Because
Eric,
for me, earlier, I thought there was a couple guys, like Jeremy Langford was one for me for a while, kind of coming around a little bit on it. But I look at the list, and right now, like, I don't really see anybody that I would just be like, yeah, you know what, I'm not buying them. Maybe someone like Justin Forsett, I guess, might be a guy. You guys have anybody that you just like, I don't want?
Eric, let's throw to you first. Is there anybody on that list?
Well, it's kind of funny. It's almost every single one of the first rounders. I'd rather build a big team and be able to deal with an injury if it came up. So, and especially the running backs. Todd Gurley, I don't know if you guys saw it, but Matt Harmon did an article about he is a transcendent talent. But Matt Harmon did this article and kind of broke down like what makes an RB1, and Todd Gurley does. It's just the offense he's on doesn't meet any of those types of things. So as good as he is, and he is so good that he could overcome that, and that's kind of the counter argument. But I kind of buy into that a little bit. So even guys like Todd Gurley, David Johnson, as good as he is, he only had 15 or more touches. Was it like 3 games last year? So they're already talking about maybe having a little bit of a timeshare there. So he's great. We're going to have to see what happens with him. But anybody that you're putting that much investment into, I'm just not really comfortable with that. I would rather spread it out over my starting lineup than invest that much into one player. But Matt Jones, oh boy, I looked into him and some of the stats and just kind of looked at some of the tape and stuff like that. I did not like what I saw, and I get the point that there's nobody behind him, really. But even Keith Marshall, so he's a genetic freak, and he's a smart scorer. Just in like one of those guys in the 90th plus percentile, like great speed. I think he ran a 40 and 4.31 or something like that. And he actually challenged Todd Gurley in the beginning at Georgia, and they thought he might have been the better running back there. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I think somebody's going to emerge from that backfield, and I just don't have good feelings about Matt Jones whatsoever, even if he does get a lot of the touches, and especially in just the regular snake drafts. He's going in like the 4th or 5th round. He's a little bit cheaper in auction drafts, so maybe if he's cheap enough, I'll take him. But be careful with that guy.
Yeah, that's funny because that's a name that always kind of stood out to me too. As a guy, I just couldn't see myself wanting a lot of shares of.
Lister, what about you? Who are you striking off the list?
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm not a Matt Jones fan either. I just know that he's very cheap for a starting running back, but I definitely wouldn't own him. I also don't like the Jacksonville situation. I don't like Chris Ivory, and I would like TJ Yeldon more if Ivory wasn't there, but I just think it's kind of neither one of them. Probably the biggest guy I don't like though of all is Jay Ajayi in Miami. Not just because Arian Foster's there. I didn't think much of him last year either, and coming out of college. So I wouldn't own him. And I think Foster will do okay, but I do know that he's definitely a band-aid. So Ajayi could see some time, but I don't think they trust him in Miami either, because they brought C.J. Anderson in. They were trying to sign guys and they couldn't. So that's a guy I won't have.
Slim, I was waiting for you to say Jeremy Hill.
Hey, I'll still take Hill for the right price. I don't like him. I don't like him as a person, but I'll take him.
Oh, it's personal, is it?
It is now. Yeah. After you hammered me in that dynasty trade about 2 years ago.
Oh,
it's become personal.
It's become personal now.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking one name that we haven't brought up that I was expecting to come up throughout all this is Duke Johnson, especially when we talk lots about PPR. Eric, any love for the Duke?
Yeah, I don't think he's bad, and I think the great thing about Duke Johnson is that you can pair him with Isaiah Crowell, and so you have that backfield. You have Hugh Jackson there, and Cleveland's a really tough offense to kind of try to figure out, because you have Hugh Jackson there, a bunch of good wide receivers. If RG3 is decent, you might actually have a pretty decent offense there. So I kind of like Duke Johnson, but if I'm going to get Duke Johnson, I'm kind of going to pair him with Isaiah Crowell, just because Crowell is so cheap, and he actually was pretty good last year. I think it was like the last 6 games he averaged over 5 yards per carry. I mean, he's not that bad, so he's not getting a lot of fanfare, but take a look at him.
Slim, counter argument?
No, I look at Duke as kind of like a Carlos Hyde light, in the sense of people are starting to get hyped about what he could potentially do this year.
Yep.
Which is kind of, I guess, a little bit different though than Hyde, because I personally think Hyde is really overvalued and isn't going to do close to what a lot of people or some people think he's going to do. I actually like Duke Johnson, but I feel like his price is starting to kind of get to the level where it's pricing him out of my value. Like, I don't want to pay $20 for Duke Johnson, even though I do like him.
Right.
I feel like that's kind of where his price is starting to get closer to. And a lot of it is, the hype of Hugh Jackson, and, we've seen Crowell kind of not look real great, and, there's this thought that Cleveland's going to be pretty bad, and they're going to have to throw it a lot, and they're going to be playing from behind, and a lot of these things play into this Duke Johnson, like his skill set, what he can do. So I know even just the other night talking with some buddies, they were raving about Duke Johnson and how much they liked him, and I was like, kind of just thinking about him, like, oh man, if you guys are already starting to talk about how much you like him, then
he's going to be worth too
everybody
much.
else is probably doing the same thing. So it's kind of one guy I've always thought, I'm gonna have to watch him a little bit and just see if I can still get that price. I mean, for me, I have Dion Lewis and Duke Johnson. I always had them ranked pretty close, and Dion Lewis was always going for so much cheaper than Duke. So in mocks, I would find myself going after Dion Lewis just because he was so much cheaper, and I'm cheap, I guess. I'm only paying up for guys.
And that's that is a really good point. I saw Duke Johnson, go for $20 in the league, and then Giovanni Bernard went for $6. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Gio all day over Duke Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, Gio's solid. He doesn't, you know what you're getting. The offense is still going to pass, and it should still be decent, even though they don't have, they lost some receivers and things like that. But yeah, that's tough.
So I just am looking at the time here. Let's wrap it up with one quick question as Blister goes in and changes rankings. Out of kid. I love that you just multitask. It's awesome. As I'm looking at the list, he's all of a sudden, ding, ding, ding. He's changing guys. I like it. Dropping Dion Lewis down. And then make sure you change the date on the top, right? So that our members that come to the website and have paid their $14.95 see that you have updated. Anyways, that was a quick little side plug there. I want to do this just quick. I want you each to think about this $1 running backs that you are willing to take that shot on. So there's a whole lot of them, and the later guys. Eric, let's start with you. Who's a $1 guy that you're going to take a flyer on?
Well, I have to think about this a little bit more, but a guy that I liked, I watched his tape and I really liked it, is Jordan Howard out of Chicago. I haven't seen anything in the preseason that makes me kind of really want to support that. So I'm having a pretty tough time with him. But Spencer Ware has looked pretty good, and so if Jamal Charles, for some reason, can't come back from his knee injury, and I think Spencer Ware might even be able to return some value, even if Charles is healthy. So yeah, Jordan Howard, I really liked him. I want to see some more out of him, but Spencer Ware's up there too.
All right, Slim, how about you, a $1 guy?
Just one? Come on, you can't do it to me like that.
Okay, give me two, but then Blister's gonna have a tough goal because there'll be 4 off the board already.
I want to make it tough.
Just kidding.
On him. I'll take
good.
2.
Do it.
Devontae Booker's a guy who intrigues me. Was that your guy?
Blister was cursing under his breath.
Keep going.
I've never been a huge C.J. Anderson believer, and some of the reports I've read, some of the beat writers are saying that Booker is the best running back on the team. I don't know if he's gonna ever earn, a full lion's share of the touches, but I mean, he's one injury away from maybe just taking this job and literally running away with it. So, I'm not a big advocate for handcuffing, but I mean, if I own C.J. Anderson, he might be a guy that I would really look late on my draft of getting, even just because I think he's just straight up talented. I don't think he gives me that much, Yes, he does provide some insurance, but I still like him just because he's good. Another guy, and this maybe is the homer in me, is Sean Drone. I just, again, think the Niners' offense is going to be pathetic. They're going to be having to play from behind a ton. Hyde isn't going to be the pass-catching back. Mike Davis isn't going to be a pass-catching back. I mean, Sean Drone actually provides kind of some low-end RB2 upside in PPR leagues if he can catch, 50 passes or even 60 passes in a pretty shitty offense that's just going to have to throw a lot of short little passes to running backs and to the receivers. So, yeah, he intrigues me a little bit too.
Okay, what about you, Blister? You got two. You probably took both the guys you were.
Yeah, well, I think
thinking
all
about.
Eric and Slim had good choices there. I'm going to throw in Cameron Artis-Payne in Carolina. Reports are, depending what you hear and read, some people don't like him, some do, but I think Jay Stu, he does have injury history. He is aging, and he's not healthy right now. He hasn't been healthy all preseason since last year when they played, so I think he'd be the guy that gets the first crack there. So he's not a bad guy to keep stashed. And Jerick McKinnon is another guy in Minnesota that, even though there was a lot of hype with Jerick, I still see him going for $1 in auction drafts. So, he's a good guy to grab as well because he could get more opportunity this year, and AP's not getting any younger. So guys like that are always good to stash in good situations that have the potential to start at some point during the year.
All right, nice stuff. I was just thinking someone was going to throw in a Derrick Henry. I don't mind Sproles at the buck if they just paid him, and you got the Band-Aid, Ryan Matthews. I don't know if he can be a 3-down back there in Sproles, but that they have a game plan to make sure he gets touches and is in the game, so I don't mind him for a buck for a late one either. And Slim, I was hoping you weren't going to say Sean Drone, because I thought that would be too easy being a San Fran fan, but makes sense.
I got the love for him.
I know, for sure. And he might be that $1 guy that all of a sudden ends up being the steal of the draft, right?
Well, that's what I'm hoping, maybe. That's why I got him stashed deep on my dynasty bench right now.
Deep. I'll look at that trade later too. The ping pong that is Terrell Pryor. It's a trade to him. He drops him. He picks him up. Going to trade him back to me. This is good. This is awesome. Anyways, guys, that's good. Really good RB content for the auction fans out there. We talked a lot about overall tier targets and nomination strategies, late round, $1 flyers. So some really good stuff. Eric, before we take off, why don't you just tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and where they can find your stuff besides on our site now?
Sure, a couple places. So I'm at the gridironexperts.com, and I'm also a writer at thefantasyfootballers.com, and I'm on Twitter at FF, that's like fantasy football _Googe, Gouge.
Now, I got to ask, Googe, is that a nickname?
Yeah. No, actually, it's something I just kind of came up with. In the Navy, Googe is kind of like almost like rumors or inside information, stuff like that. So, hey, what's the Googe day and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's kind of a Navy term. I knew that probably would go a little bit under the radar. Not many people would know that.
Well, no, that's good. I like that. That's good.
I thought for sure it was some kind of nickname or something too.
For sure, and that's why I didn't throw it out earlier how they could get a hold of you, because I wasn't sure if it was Googe or Gouge. I'm not the greatest at reading
honestly,
names.
I don't know either. I don't know.
All right, boys. So I guess we're going to go again Tuesday night. We're going to try to do two this week and two next week. Is that correct, Slim Blister?
I'm good.
Yeah.
All right,
Monday we got
awesome.
a draft. Hey, before we go,
Yeah.
to anybody that does listen here, I have a league. Bex and I have been in this league called the ECL. It's a bunch of guys. We're a good bunch of guys. We have a good chat group, and we get into some pretty deep conversations, totally unrelated to football half the time, but they're a lot of fun. But they decided that when we first did the draft, it was a snake, and we were all kind of auction guys that got into it. So we've been talking auction, going over prices on our chat group. So I said, well, let's just have an auction. So I don't know if all the guys want to go in. I think I have 7 signed up. So there's about 5 spots, 100 US. DM me, direct message me on Twitter if you want in, and I'll send you the directions. It's going to be a PPR league, obviously, pretty standard after that. But at Mr. Blister, MRBLISTR, if you want in. I think we're going to draft the Labor Day Monday, which is, I think, the 5th of September. Yeah, it is. 5th of September, probably around 9 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock, somewhere in there. So let me know if you want in. We got 5 spots.
DM Blister. And hey, Slim, I saw that FF Auction Advice had fired out a mock that a guy had dropped the link on. How did that turn out? Did you hear from them?
I didn't hear.
Okay.
I did notice he tweeted another one when I was at that wedding, and I didn't see it till this morning. So
Oh, okay.
listening.
Because he
apologize.
was asking me where the best place was to mock, and I said, well, why don't you just do like we did, set up a link and then send it out to FF Auction Advice, and then it'll probably fill up pretty quick. So I was hoping that actually worked out for him.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't hear from him, so hopefully.
So there's a good place to hit up an auction community at FF Auction Advice. Chatter going on there, mock drafts being posted, those types of things. And for all things auction, head over to the website, thefantasyfootballauction.com. And the pod's on there, articles are on there, Eric's article's on there. And we'll be hopefully hitting a couple more pods here before everyone is getting, while people are getting through their drafts. So Eric, I just want to say thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. It was a lot of fun having you on, and I enjoy the Twitter handle a lot now.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for coming, man. It was awesome.
All right, and so I guess I'll see the other two of you on Tuesday night, and for the rest of you, I'll see you when it's springtime in the Rockies.